Hi Old School fans, I'm Dan the Old School Conditioning Man. This is Old School Conditioning Training. Right, and welcome to day 11, week 4 of the Great Victorian Strength and Fitness Experiment. Right, what are we going to be talking about today? Right, so we're just starting week 4 of the experiment, right? So I thought at this point it would be a good time to have our first sort of look back and sort of see how it's going, all right? We're not at the first 10-week progression standard, but things are going well towards it. So we'll talk about how things are going, where we are, where we've come from, and where we think we can expect to be in by week 10, and then we'll have another debrief. Then I'm going to be talking mainly today really about the body weight strength conditioning phase of it, okay? And then on Friday I will do a debrief for pedestrianism and the dumbbell training, and during the week I'll do one for the Victorian Sports Day and how that's gone into helping round out the programme and everything as well. So you'll get 3 debriefs this week which will cover the whole lot. Right, so let's start off with the first debrief. So, right, we started 3 and a bit weeks ago, and I said right at the beginning it was going to be an 18-month experiment, right? Okay, and I decided to break it down into 10-week microcycles within that, and then they would progress onwards and onwards as we go through the 18 months. So, before we start talking about where we are now, okay, let's lay down the parameters and remind ourselves the parameters of what the experiment was about, okay? Right, the experiment itself was to see actually how fit we could get using the Victorian fitness standards, and the 2 manuals and the experts I used for the experiment were Professor Charles Harrison, and we used his manual for the dumbbell training, Indian Club dumbbell and sword exercise of 1868, and I chose him. One, because he's written a very good manual, and he also covers cardiovascular exercise as in pedestrianism, okay, which is actually going quite well, and I found it stacks up pretty well against modern fitness training methods as well. But also because in 1868 he was widely regarded as the strongest man in the world, so he knew a lot about strength training. The second guy, okay, William Woods, who wrote Gymnastic and Athletic Exercise in 1869 in New York City. Again, a very knowledgeable gentleman, okay, and his was more based towards, what we now term as gymnastics, okay, but gymnastics really means anything that you can do in a gym. And that's why I've put in the phase that we're talking about today, the body weight strength and conditioning phase, is because when you look at William Wood's manual, although there are preparatory exercises before you start getting onto the basic exercises of learning how to use the high parallel bars, the Olympic rings, and he also does stuff with high trapeze, but we're not going to go into that, okay? That's going to stay out of the realms of our experiment, okay? But there's not enough preparatory work to get on to develop, connective tissue structure, and to stop ourselves from having some pretty nasty injuries from swinging on Olympic rings and swinging around on high parallel bars. That's not to say, right, that just because it's not in his manual that he didn't know about it. Of course he would have, okay? He was an expert in his field. And if we were able to travel back 164 years in time and actually train with him, okay, he would have had the knowledge, okay, to assess us as individuals and then go, right, okay, this is what you need to do. All right, we need to take a longer run up to get you at this, just as I do with clients when I see them when they come and train with me, okay? All right, you have to look, I have to look at people's level of physical ability and their technical capability, all right, to what they're wanting to do or what we're wanting to do with them, and then we've got to look at that, what they're doing at the moment and what they've done in the past, and then match it to what's coming, and then build the plan smoothly so we can get them there injury free. And that's what he would have done with us, could we have gone back in time with him? Okay, the reason it's not there in the manual is because it would just make the manual just too long and unreadable. So he's got to put some in, okay, but there's a limit to what can be put in a manual, progression standards wise. And also what we've got to remember is, although these both are good physical fitness and strength instructional manuals on their own, and you can learn a lot from them, and we are, but we do have to remember as well, they were also pieces of marketing material, so that he could get his word out to a wider mass that would earn him money from people buying the books, obviously, and also then more people would come and train with him, just like we advertise on the internet today. They would do it through books and things like that. All right, so there is a bit of a marketing thing as well. Okay, so you've got to take that into account as well. Okay, but that doesn't detract from the books either of these two guys wrote. Okay, that's not what I'm saying. Okay, all right. So the parameters, right, it was 18 months long. Right, I've covered the two guys that we've got the manuals from, okay, and why we're using them. And also the parameters were to at the end of the 18 months, to see how fit we could get, and also to see actually how using these two gentlemen's standards of physical exercise that they've written down in their manuals, how it stacks up against modern scientific training methods and methodology and modern scientific understanding of the human body, as opposed to they didn't have that quite scientific knowledge, and see how it stacks up. And I can say actually 4 weeks in, it's stacking up pretty well actually. Charles Harrison himself is already proving to be well ahead of his time, especially in the use of pedestrianism. That's going very well. Okay, although it predates him, it's Georgian and probably earlier than that. Prize fighters, I've mentioned on one of the videos, prize fighters would go and do 20-30 miles an hour, 20-30 miles walking a day out in the countryside at a high speed, okay, before going and doing their version of what we now call the fight camp, okay, to build up the strength in their legs, their cardiovascular capacity. And I tell you what, guys, it does work, because as Charles Harrison says, he says we're working towards being able to do 5 miles in under an hour. That's 12 minutes a miles, guy, and it's not running. You are not allowed to run in that. It's walking. Okay. I mean, I started, slowly, because of Achilles tendon injuries, but we'll get onto that in a minute. That's part of the parameters and why I've slowed things down. So I'm now on to 3 miles. I started at 2.2 miles and did it in about 48 minutes, just to let my tendons get used to it. I'm now doing 3 miles, and last time I did it in 41 minutes, so it's getting faster, and I wasn't going as fast as I could go. So it's an achievable standard. Whether I'll get there in 10 weeks, I don't know. It all depends on the tendons, but they are getting better actually, so that's good. But I'll talk more about the pedestrianism later at the end of the week, when I talk more about the dumbbell training and the pedestrianism, because we'll be talking more about Charles Harrison then. I'm going to stick with the parameters at the moment. Right now, the reason why I chose how to construct the bodyweight conditioning phase was, as I've already said, is a preparatory stage to get us to when we start training more from William Wood's manual. But also as well, okay, I've got particular issues, okay, alright, so I've had to take it from a lower standard, okay. Right, so what issues have I got that affects my physical ability to undertake quite hard physical training? Right, well, one, I'm 51 years old. Okay, I'm not a 21-year-old anymore. I don't bounce as well as I used to. Okay, but that's not the main issues actually. I'm still quite fit. Okay, but the main issues I have, I can't run anymore. Okay, I can't skip. Even though I'm still boxing, I haven't boxed for 18 months before the start of this experiment. So, you know, the boxing's good, but I'm a little bit more flat-footed because I can't get the bounce out of my feet because of the tendon issues I have. And also I have an old shoulder injury, okay, which I'm having to rehab. So I can't do full pull-ups where I could do, but I can't do them at the moment because of a shoulder injury. So that's why I've decided to go right back and use the standing pull-ups, the standing push-ups against the wall to rehab, as well as to prepare all the smaller parts of muscles around joints, okay, and also our connective tissue structure, okay, for months down the line when we start to be swinging around on rings and parallel bars, okay, because that's going to be quite important. And also another issue that I do have, okay, is quite a long couple of years ago, although I've done strongman in the past, I've done powerlifting, you know, I've done bodybuilding and that, but I had to stop it several years ago because I have a central nervous system disorder, right? Well, not according to the British government, I haven't, because according to them, it doesn't exist. So what is it I have? I have a thing called Gulf War syndrome. Okay, I got this from my service in 2 tours of Iraq. Okay, and basically I have to take quite a lot of medication. I have to take anti-Parkinson's medication, anti-epilepsy medication, anti-seizure medication. I don't have Parkinson's, I don't have epilepsy, I've been tested for it, okay? But they help my condition. So what is my condition? Now, the reason I had to give up a lot of heavy duty weight training is because it fired off my central nervous system, and if I don't take the pills, okay, I suffer from a lot of muscular convulsions, okay. You know, I mean, I look all right at the moment, okay, because I'm on the pills. But if I stop taking the pills, within about a day, okay, I look like a live fish that you've just pulled out of the water, put on the floor, put on the bank, and it's flip-flopping all over the place. So I look like I'm breakdancing, okay. It is horrendous, all right, and it's actually quite exhausting, okay. But I still continue with physical fitness because it does help. You know, I find regular movement and activity does help with it, but I have to be careful with certain types of exercise. Like, I haven't done any ab work for ages because I do find, because where the central nervous system kicks off, it's from my lower spine, okay, and it just sends signals to all my limbs and they just thrash about for ages. It can last 5 minutes, it can last several hours. So I have to be careful about that, and that's another reason why I took it right down to sort of basic level and then working back up so my body and my central nervous system gets used to it. And that's also why I took down the pedestrianism and took it slow, because of my Achilles tendon injuries. Okay, that's because of, you know, 13 years in the army, you know, jumping on and off tanks, in and out of trenches, you know, running around with, you know, 50-60 pounds worth of complete equipment, fighting order and weapons, you know, getting shot at, getting blown up, you know, it is fairly concussive upon the body, okay, and, you know, I've run marathons, I've run ultra marathons, you know, I've pulled trucks, you name it, I've pushed, pulled, lifted, thrown, hit it, shot it, or blown it up. Right, pretty much anything that's been on this planet over the years. And also, before I joined the army, you know, what's now called mixed martial arts, it wasn't called that back then because it was still quite underground. I did that quite heavily, you know, and then I boxed in the army as well. So, you know, there's injuries from, you know, quite kinetic sports history, shall I say. My tendon issues were really picked up from in lockdown. I did a virtual ultra marathon race. There's about 60 people that entered it, and it was a 43-mile race, carrying 40 pounds in weight on your back in boots. It's a military style endurance event, and I ran, you know, 43 miles in about 10 and a half hours. Okay, and that was just the straw that broke the camel's back for my tendons, really. So that ended my running career. So where have we got within the bodyweight strength and conditioning phase? Right. Okay. So at the beginning, I've set everything out for 10-week microcycles within this 18-month experiment, and there's progression standards every 10 weeks. Okay, that we have to hit. Right, so where are we at week 4 with the bodyweight strength and conditioning? Right, you've seen the video, well I hope you have. If you haven't, go back and watch it and you'll see, although I've cut it down, but I've put it set by set and I've said how many reps I've done. Alright, right, so the standing bodyweight pull-up, right, I had 10 weeks to get to the first progression standard of 3 sets of 50. Okay, today I did 3 sets of 45. Okay, so next week, definitely the week after, I'll hit the 50 reps progression standard for that. All right, so then I'll be able to then make that harder by getting my body lower to the floor, so there's more of my body weight to pull. Okay, all right, so that'll make that harder. Now the press ups against the wall. All right, today I did 3 sets of 50, so I've hit the progression standard. All right, in under half the amount of time. Okay. And actually it's helped my shoulder injury a lot. Okay, my shoulder was a bit niggly and painful this morning before I started training. Okay, but the training seems to have ironed it out. Okay, and it's I'm quite pain free at the moment, and it has generally got a lot better. Right, the squats. Okay, we did 3 sets of squats today. Right, the progression standard for week 10. Okay, was 3 sets of 100. Okay, alright, so we did 3 sets of 50 today, so I'll easily do that in another 6 weeks or 5.5 weeks. Okay, alright, I'll just add 10 reps a set. That'd be quite easy. Alright, and yeah, and like I said, I've needed to pace this out for myself because I don't need to be overloading my central nervous system, or nobody does, but I just have to be a little bit more careful of that because of an underlying central nervous system disorder that I have. Okay, so but it's progressing very well. Now the sit-ups, okay, the progression standard for that I've set 3 sets of 150. I did 3 sets of 50 today. Now I do have to be quite careful with abdominal work, okay, because that does tend to kick off the seizures that I have, the muscle convulsions, so I'm probably not going to hit 150 reps at the 10 weeks, but I'm not really too fussed about that. I'll just take it nice and slow. Slowly but surely runs the race. I'd rather take some of it a little slower where I know I have a particular problem, and that's pretty true of anyone's training, really. You've got to tailor it down to yourself. Okay. So week 4, we're either at progression standards and we're hitting them before we've even got to week 5, like in the press ups against the wall. We'll now be doing press ups at hands on something about hip height. Okay, we were doing 3 sets of 50, and then we'll go to 3 sets of 40 or 45. Okay, and then we'll keep going down and down and down until we get to press ups on the floor, and then we'll start working towards handstand press ups and static strength exercises like crow stands and things like that. But that's much further down the line before we get to more into William Woods as part of the progression stuff towards the William Woods training manual. So by next week or the week after, I'll hit the progression standard for the standing pulls. Right, so they'll get harder. Okay, the squats. Right, I'm not going to start doing one-legged squats and things like that because my Achilles tendons just won't take them, and I'm just not going to put that sort of pressure through them. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll probably go to things like an overhead squat, because that will also bring in core work as well. All right, so yeah, I mean it's going extremely well at the moment. I'm really quite pleased. Okay, all right. Injuries and things like that. it seems to be getting better, right, and helping. Okay, all right, so that's good. All right, so right, so I think that roundabout just about rounds up. Yeah, we've set the parameters for the experiment, and we've explained why we're doing certain things. Okay, and we've explained where we've got to, explained where we're wanting to get to within the 10 weeks. Okay, and the exercises that aren't probably going to get there, we've explained really why it's not a huge problem if we don't. Okay, all right, because we've got 18 months. Okay, all right. On Friday, I'll do a debrief, which will be more in depth about Professor Charles Harrison's dumbbell method. That is going very well, actually. I'll have a quick mention about that. I started off on 10 reps of each exercise. Some exercises are done with a 25-pound dumbbell, some are done with a 15, okay? Did have a problem with one of the exercises. It was the one where you're turning like that. That really did aggravate a shoulder injury, so I dropped that exercise. And the one I did like, which was the standing petrol fly, okay? He doesn't really give it a name, but it's basically what it is. I wanted to keep that because it's working our pectoral muscles through their natural movement. It's actually their primary function is to draw the hands together. Okay, all right. Horizontal flexion and extension like bench press. That's their secondary function. It's not their primary function. So that is the primary function of the pectoral muscles. Okay, so I wanted to keep that in, but because we was doing it like that, it was playing havoc with an old shoulder injury. So I looked at another Victorian dumbbell exercise, okay, and that's why I came up with the bent backwards fly, okay, all right, because it's still targeting the chest and working through the range of movement that I wanted. But actually, it's even more beneficial because you're leaning backwards, okay. As you lean backwards, okay, your multifidus, the hyperextensor muscles that run either side of the spine, they're activating, your lower back's activating, and also your scapular muscles and all the muscles of your upper back. When your arms come down, okay, they're contracting very hard. So it's also preparing us, okay, for further along, okay. And all of the exercises I've increased reps. I haven't increased the weight yet, because you've got to get to 50 reps on each exercise before you can increase the weight, and then you decrease the reps and increase the weight, okay? But on some of the exercises on all the exercises I've at least doubled the amount of reps I've done, okay, at the beginning, okay, some more than that. So some I will reach the progression standard before the 10 weeks, but I'm expecting to hit the progression standards for the dumbbell exercises at the 10-week period, or if not slightly before. Right, okay, right. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this interesting, okay, all right, and this is the debrief so far, and there'll be another one Friday, and then we'll talk about the sports as well, and how they round out the training program and just add a little bit of fun to it, and also learning a skill, okay, and you're learning something as well, which I think is quite important, okay, so it engages the brain and not only the body. I'm a big believer in that, and also just injects a bit of fun into it, okay, because he doesn't like punching people in the face and hitting people with blunt objects and swords. You know what I mean? Or is that just me? Right, okay, well, thanks for watching, okay? I hope this has been informative, okay? And you can look forward to a couple more, and then that'll be it till we get to week 10, okay? All right, so I hope you've enjoyed the Great Victorian Strength and Fitness Experiment as much as I've enjoyed doing the training. I really have, actually, all right? And I hope I'm proving that, you know, just because these things are 155 years old, they still stack up well and actually compete better, I think, with modern standards of training methodology, and actually prove how far ahead these two guys were ahead of their time, because they were massively ahead of their time. Their understanding and the things they write in their books about, listening to your body and adapting it, and not going too far so you depress your central nervous system. Well, they don't understand about that, but they are really talking about that, right? And it's quite an eye opener actually to how much in-depth knowledge these guys had about training. I mean, I knew they would do anyway, but I'm just finding out and more about actually really how much these guys knew, okay, as trainers, okay, and as athletes themselves. Right, so I'm Dan. This has been Old School Conditioning Training. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll catch you tomorrow on day 12, week 4 of the Great Victorian Strength and Fitness Experiment, or a Victorian Sports Day. Catch you there, fellas.